Hey, I want to welcome everybody to the lockdown sessions presented by Wrestling Travel. Today is a very special day for me because we have Mr. Nikita Koloff, legendary pro wrestler, with us today. Nikita, how are you this morning?
You know what, Justin? I am doing well, comrade Chitoeta. But
We got to get a little bit of that in when we can.
yeah, well, just a taste for the fans. They're always like, do the voice just one time, So there you go. There's the one time. Hey, did you tell me when we were talking that World Travel based in Manchester, United Kingdom?
Wrestling Travel, yep, based in Manchester.
Well, it just so happens I'm a Manchester United fan. I just want to say for the record. So there you go.
Perfect. Now you've either won over half of the audience or you've made the other half angry. You never.
Well, hey. Well, and part of that is my mom was born in England.
Oh, really?
She was born up on the English-Scottish border, a little town called Hayden, outside of Carlisle. Some of the UK folks will probably, I'm sure, have heard of Carlisle. Maybe not Hayden, but little tiny village outside of Carlisle. And my sister, brother, and I, several years ago, after her passing, went over and spent about 10 days in England and went up there just to honor her, to see her village. And we found the house that she was actually born in. They didn't rush you off to a hospital back in 1919. I mean, there was midwives, and you were born in houses typically. And we stumbled across that. We weren't looking for that or intending to find that, but we stumbled, and it was pretty amazing. We had lunch at the little pub there in town, the one pub in town, and it was really, really cool. So to all the chaps in England, I love you.
That's a fantastic story. How long did she live in England?
You know what? She was born in 1919, and then her mom, who was born there, she met my grandfather. He was in the Royal Canadian Air Force, I guess, the Canadian military. They met, during World War I, and fell in love, and then she came over. My mom came over on a boat in 1921. So she left England when she was 2, and she never returned. But my sister and brother and I wanted to really honor her, and we returned. We went back to her home village just to honor her.
That's an amazing story, and the fact that you found the house that she was born in.
Yeah, by accident, but it was pretty cool.
That's great. And sometimes I wonder if stuff is really by accident. You just
yeah. I mean, I've got a Jewish friend of mine that says coincidence is God's way of remaining anonymous, and I'm like, you know what, Jeffrey, I like that. That is good.
So I have to tell you now, the person that started Wrestling Travel, I'm not sure if he's a Man United fan, but I'll have you look up. His team is called the Tranmere Rovers.
Okay.
So I will be in trouble if I tell him that Nikita mentioned Man United and I did not mention to take a look at the Tranmere Rovers.
For sure, yeah. Don't get yourself in trouble. Come on.
Yeah, I know. I don't. And I was actually, I actually went over there in a previous job. I worked hiring for summer camps, and they had at Old Trafford Stadium is where they had the hiring event, and you could take a tour of the stadium. And I went in there, and I told you I'm from Wisconsin, and in Green Bay you can do a tour of Lambeau Field. I could stand in the end zone, get a picture. They had
I did that.
Did you? They had
Yep.
so much security there that you couldn't even touch a blade of grass or the turf at Old Trafford. They're like, if you touch it, you're like banned for life. And I'm like, well, okay, it's crazy. But you did the tour of Lambeau, huh? Yeah.
That is, yeah. I got a good friend of mine, Jerry Haynes, who lives in Green Bay. He actually was personal friends with. He just retired. The personal trainer. He was a personal trainer for the Packers for I don't know how many years, but Jerry was good friends with him. So I was fortunate actually to have just a personal tour. I mean, I'm talking top to bottom, man, from the press boxes to to the state-of-the-art training facility that they recently built, to the cafeteria, which blew my mind, to the training room, to the locker rooms, out to the field, everything. Pepper was the trainer.
Yes. Okay. Yeah. Pepper Burris, I
Yeah.
believe. Yeah.
Yeah. He was the main head trainer for many, many years. Just retired in the last year or two, and so Jerry got me the private tour of Lambeau, and then took me to a game against the Carolina Panthers, who got smacked down starting in the first quarter by Aaron Rodgers, and the Green Bay fans were so nice. They're like, "Oh, we're so sorry." I go, "Look, I'm going to sleep tonight when I put my head on a pillow. Win, lose, or draw. I'm not one of those fans, that stays up for 3 days." But what an experience! I looked at him. I go, "Look, I'm at Lambeau Field. I don't care if they win or lose. I love legendary Lambeau."
Now, are you still a Vikings fan at heart, or are you Carolina, or you don't really, hey, whatever?
I mean, I just enjoy sports in general. Let me just say that. I would cheer the Panthers unless they're playing the Vikings. So I am. I'm still, grew up in Minnesota, so I am still a loyal Viking Minnesota Twin fan. The North Stars, even though they had to go to Dallas to win a Stanley Cup, I still support the local teams there, and really had an opportunity. Couple interesting things with Fran Tarkington, the opportunity to we co-labored back in the 90s in a business together for a short time, and had the opportunity I had Jerry Kramer. You know that name?
I do. I've met Jerry. Great guy.
Yes, he is. I was in a golf tournament, celebrity golf tournament with him in South Carolina one year, and he had no transportation. So I had him locked down in my car for 2.5 days. And, man, heard stories about Vince Lombardi and his rookie season, and it was incredible. I just love stories. I love people's stories. And man, when Jerry shared some of those stories, it was amazing. So, but I doubt we're here to talk about football.
Oh, yeah.
American or otherwise, but anyway. Cool
I go off on a tangent. That's why unscripted.
Nice.
Okay, so meanwhile, back in the world of professional wrestling, can you tell me, well, actually, before we get there, I want to stay with the football. You went to Robbinsdale High School. Is that accurate?
I did. Robbinsdale High School, a suburb of Minneapolis, and really I think I know where you're going, but go ahead.
Well, I was going to, obviously the easy part is that area has a lot of, it's pro wrestling rich. Joe Laurinaitis, some of the names I've read, and whether or not you guys were in school at the same time, well, you're talking Kurt Hennig, Barry Darso, Tom Zank, Rick Rude. I don't know if I'm leaving anybody. John Nord, yes, the Barbarian.
Yep, Scott Norton, Wayne Bloom, Mike Enos. The list continues on.
So did you played defensive line? This is where I test Wikipedia out right now. He says you played defensive line and you played wide receiver on offense at Robbinsdale High School. What it didn't say, what I was wondering, is when you actually went to Morehead State, which I believe is still, what did you play there?
So it's been an interesting journey because, I played I was one of only 3 sophomores to play on the varsity. Our head coach didn't believe in playing, even dressing sophomores for varsity, let alone playing sophomores. So only 3 of us, my sophomore year, Mike Hauk, Brad Keefe, and myself, dressed and played. And so I played wide receiver, and I was a kicker and a punter my sophomore year. Then junior, senior year, I did play defense as well, defensive end. But I transitioned from wide receiver to tight end as I started putting on a little size, a little weight in high school. And one season, we actually, my junior year, Barry Darso, John Nord, Rick Rude, Kurt Hennig, we were all on the same team that year. And it's kind of crazy. People are like, what's in the water? And I don't know. I don't know. Maybe iron, I guess. I don't know what was in the water. And then, of course, Tom Zink and Brady Boone was another kind of a lesser-known name, but Brady Boone was another one, all out of Robbinsdale. And you're in AWA territory, so you'll appreciate this. Vern Gagne was a graduate of Robbinsdale High School. Now, a few years prior, and Gene Okerlund was a graduate of Robbinsdale High School.
Wow.
And then, and then Laurinaitis and Mike Hagstrand and Wayne Bloom, and they went to some of the other city schools. We'd eventually kind of all meet at a place called The Gym in Minneapolis, which a friend of ours, Jim Youngner, started that gym. He was another graduate of Robbinsdale High School. And all of us, many of us, the credit goes to a health teacher who was also a professional bodybuilder by the name of Jerry McFarland back in junior high school, which got all of us kind of intrigued with the weights. And that's kind of, I like to give him the credit on all of that. In college, sorry, you asked me about college. In college, it was interesting because I left, graduated high school. I actually went to junior college at Golden Valley Lutheran College. I tell people not to learn about Jesus, but because they were the #1 football team, JUCO football team in the nation at the time. And they actually had several former Robbinsdale High School or Robbinsdale football coaches at Golden Valley. And so Mike Hauk and I went over there to play ball. And then I was reunited with Brad Keefe. Remember those names from our sophomore year who dressed for varsity? Brad Keefe went to Morehead State, so I reunited with him and actually played right next to him at tight end up at Morehead State University. And I had a love for catching the ball, and I played some defensive goal line defense for them as well. So I guess, I was a decent athlete and able to play both ways at the college level.
My next test of we'll kind of break away from football, but were you were planning, you either tried out or thinking about trying out for the USFL? Is that accurate?
Yeah, no, that is accurate. My heart and passion was weightlifting and football all the way through junior high school, even into college. My dream was to play in the NFL, like many young boys, right, who play football. And I had a couple setbacks in college. My freshman year, since we're talking about football, remember LT broke the leg of Joe Theismann in a game. I actually suffered that identical fracture my freshman year in college in a game, and rehabilitated, came back and played 3 more years when nobody said, or some said I would never recover from that, only to fracture my other leg my senior year in college. But those setbacks didn't hold me back. They really set me up for a comeback. And I was being scouted my senior year at Morehead State because the NFL, they found me by scouting my quarterback, Mark Reed, who ended up backing up Phil Simms over with the Giants for 4 years. And that's how they discovered me. And so I was inspired and felt I was on that right path, and had lined up a tryout with USFL thanks to Gordon Soley.
Wow.
Yeah, Gordon Soley, who was friends with Coach Spurrier at the Tampa Bay Bandits. And one last little caveat, side note to that, had I actually gone down there and tried out, there's 2 guys that were actually on that team that wrestling fans may recognize, one by the name of Ron Simmons and the other by the name of Lex Luger, who were a part of that Bandit team that I didn't meet in a football tryout, but would later meet in the squared circle.
Funny, I've been showing the guys from Wrestling Travel. I'm the only American counterpart right now. Actually, Brittany works with us too. But as far as the boys, I came across an old picture of Lex in his Green Bay Packer uniform.
Yeah.
Trying to,
yes.
And I go, guess who it is? And they got it right away because I thought, they won't recognize him. So,
Yep. He was a Packer there. He was there for a few years. Can't remember. I think it was after he played in the Canadian Football League.
Yeah, and I'm not sure if he was just on the practice squad for a few years or not. I don't know. And then him and same as a junkyard dog is a big name that gets tossed around here as being on the practice squad with the Packers at one time.
Yep. So,
of course,
and little side note too, if sounds like you're probably a Packer historian, but if you remember a tight end by the name of Paul Kaufman,
yes,
if you remember that name, Paul was really kind of my inspiration because, in those days, I wasn't your prototype tight end, the Kellen Winslow's. I wasn't 6'5", 260 pounds. I was 6'2", 245, but that was about the exact same size as Paul Kaufman. So he actually became one of my inspirations and my driving force to pursue the NFL career.
Paul Kaufman's a big name around here. I grew up watching the Packers, but I keep track of all of us here in the NFC North or Central. I don't know what it is now. I think it's the NFC North. It used to be the Central, but then you got to forget all about the Tampa Bay Buccaneers because they got kicked out. So meanwhile, everybody else at home is going, are we going to talk about pro wrestling? Are we going to talk? So I guess we better get there. I don't want to, I could talk to you all day and I imagine you have better things to do, but how do you make that transition into pro wrestling then?
So it's and for those, obviously we do only have so much time here. Go to koloff.org.
Yes.
Go to NikitaKoloff.com. You'll read more of the story. Go buy the
brief
book,
version
Nikita.
here.
Yeah, or go buy the book, Nikita, A Tale of the Ring of Redemption. You'll get the full story. You're going to get snippets of it today. But, interesting journey. Really kind of a wild ride for me because, again, I wasn't looking for a pro wrestling career, honestly. And like some who grow up dreaming of being a pro wrestler, that I dreamed of being a pro football player. And lo and behold, I guess if you want to use an expression, turnabout is fair play. Out of high school, I recruited Joe Laurinaitis from Irondale High School in New Brighton, Minnesota, to play football with me at Golden Valley, and he'd go on to Moorhead State with me. And then he'd drop out of college, and next thing I knew, he was a pro wrestler. And upon graduating from college, still training, still pursuing a football career, he called me randomly out of the blue one morning, laid out the storyline of a nephew for Ivan Koloff, and was I interested? And I told him, I said, hey, do they know? Does the promoter know? Do they know I have no amateur wrestling background? Nothing, zero, nada, and I have no professional training. I've never even hit a ring rope. They know that. Yeah, I told them. They said they didn't care. I called his promoter in Charlotte, North Carolina, Jim Crockett. I have a 5-minute conversation, sight unseen, making sure he understood that. And he said, yes. And I said, what's the next step? He said, be in my office on such a day with your head shaved. And I said, okay, I'll see you then. That was my introduction. And Justin, I walked into the office the day he said to be there, and the old cliche, the rest is history.
That's amazing. Now, you're growing up in Minnesota, heart of AWA territory. You at least watched it? Were you a fan, or was it just you're focused on lifting weights and football, that it was just something that was there that you not really paid attention to?
I mean, back in those days, I mean, you channel surfed the 3 channels we had. Oh, wait a minute, maybe we had 4. Hey, turn the dial for all you millennials out there. You're like, turn what? Yeah, the dial. No remote, no doing things from your phone. Turn the dial on the TV set, meaning you have to get up out of your chair. So, I would come across, the AWA show, Vern's show. I think it aired in Minneapolis on Sundays, and so I would, if you want to say stumble across it, but no, I was not an avid fan. It wasn't like I, locked into it every single week. Couldn't wait to see what happened the next week. And then during those junior college days, a number of us went down to North Minneapolis and trained at this little sweat box called Ventura's Gym. Jesse the Body Ventura. And so got to know Jesse in those early days. It was fun to get to know him. He got his tickets for one match at the St. Paul Civic Center, which wasn't even a match. He was doing a deadlift competition at the wrestling show against a guy named Paul Ellering, prior to him becoming Precious Paul, manager of LOD, of the Road Warriors. And that was my first introduction to a live wrestling match. Still not entertaining the idea of being one. So I guess you'd say, Justin, I had a taste of it through my college days.
Speaking of 3 channels, I always get asked, like, who my favorite pro wrestler is, and I take a lot of heat for it, but I only had 3 channels. Now, you and Ivan Koloff and the Rock and Roll Express was stuff I had to read in the magazine because I didn't have cable.
Right.
But I go, people, you're either going to question my sanity, but I'll stand by it to the end. Greg Gagne. Greg Gagne is just somebody. I watched him. He was training with Sergeant Slaughter when I first saw him as a kid. So I was immediately locked onto him and, watched him. I was talking with another wrestler last night about, how pro wrestling, you see it differently now but when you were a kid watching it. When I was little, when Kurt Hennig turned on Greg Gagne in the tag team match and wouldn't take the tag or slapped him, I'm like, you got to be kidding me. I hate this guy. I used to hate Kurt Hennig so bad. And now I look back and I go, what a great wrestler, because I go, that was the job. But yeah, so I'm a huge, I only had 3 channels, but I don't apologize for loving Greg Gagne. And someday,
no, you don't need to. Greg Gagne, Jim Brunzell. I mean,
oh yeah.
Yeah, looking back, I mean, Wahoo McDaniel. Some of the guys I kind of remember, Nick Bockwinkel, Wahoo McDaniel, the Crusher. I remember the Crusher, Baron von Raschke, who I would later go on, be a partner with in matches. It's crazy to think back on it now. And I was in so many matches, I kind of forget, honestly, some of the guys that I was in matches with, either against or, as a tag team partner. But, those are Wahoo McDaniel. He and I had a match for the unification of the U.S. title and the national heavy. He was the national heavyweight champion. I was the U.S. heavyweight champion. Crockett was gonna phase out that national championship belt, and Wahoo was gracious enough to put me over, to make me look good and drop that strap to me, and I walked away with both those titles. But so to kind of, as a younger man growing up, seeing some of those guys, and then later stepping into the ring with some of those guys was amazing,
I was gonna ask you. I don't have to do an interview to get sucked down the YouTube line, but obviously I'm huge, an honor to be speaking with you. So I'm like, I don't want to mess this up, but I get caught down. 1985, the NWA and the AWA do a joint show at Comiskey Park, and this ring is yourself, Ivan Koloff, and Barry Darsow, and you're in the ring with Baron von Raschke, the Crusher, and Dick the Bruiser. And I'm like, this, a lot of people are into like the high flying stuff, and they might say, oh, this. I'm like, I was mesmerized. I'm like, I got to ask them about this match, because all 6 of you are legends now, or even at the time. I mean, it's crazy.
It's funny you bring that up. I almost said something, but I'm glad you brought that up, like for real, because thinking back to those days, right? 1985. I mean, I'm brand new to the business, right? So I'm 285 pounds, 8% body fat, 34-inch waist, jacked up, right? And here's what I remember about that match. Again, not being a fan growing up, I didn't even know who Dick the Bruiser was, right? I'm like, but come to learn, he's as you said, legendary, right? Legendary in Indiana and all throughout wrestling. And so we go to the ring first. Of course, we're the Dirty Russians, so we're going to go to the ring first, as the heels and booed and the whole deal. Well, they start coming to the ring, and the fans are going crazy. Now, in my mind, and no disrespect, but just understand, where I was at, my mindset in those days, I see these 3, we'll just say, older guys, older guys coming to the ring, and people are going crazy. I'm looking around the stadium and going, oh my gosh, people love these guys, right? And I learned who the Baron was. I vaguely remembered Crusher from surfing the TV channels, my early days. And I'm just learning who Dick the Bruiser is. Well, that said, we get into one little highlight of that match. We get into a six-way, right? What's called a six, meaning for those who maybe aren't familiar, all six of us are in the ring at the same time. The referee's trying to get law and order, right? I end up with Dick the Bruiser in a corner. And Justin, I'll never forget as long as I live. I'm in the corner. I'm 285. Dick's in the twilight of his years, right? Is that a nice way to say that? And he starts throwing punches. And in my mind, I'm thinking, this guy couldn't fight his way out of a wet paper sack. How am I supposed to sell these punches? Make this believable. I'm 285. And not only does he start, for those who are older, might remember the Rock'em Sock'em robots, that little fit, right? That's the kind of punches he throws, but he puts sound effects with it. And so every punch he throws, he literally is going rat-a-tat-tat, rat-a-tat-tat, rat-a-tat-tat. And I'm like, rat-a-tat-tat? What the heck? I shove him away like a rag doll, and I go over to Ivan, and I go, Uncle Ivan, get that old man away from me. I'm going to kill him. And I was like, I'll take care of it. I'll take care of it, Nikki. And oh my gosh, but I have so much respect for all those guys, now. But at the time, I was just young and green and, trying to get my character over. And that's my one Dick the Bruiser story that you would appreciate.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. Because that's what I was like, man, I got to ask if you realize, because a lot of times when I'm talking to people and they're going, yeah, I was in the locker room with so-and-so and so-and-so. And I go, it's funny because at the time, you're not sitting thinking, hey, we're all going to be legends. You're hoping that we are. But when I saw that match, I'm like, man, does Nikita realize at that time, does he know Dick the Bruiser and the Crusher and the Baron? And by the way, last September, there was a local show that came up here. And as much as you try not to be, everybody calls you a mark. And I'm going, yeah, you know what? If you weren't a mark, you're probably not. That's why we're all in the business. But Baron von Raschke came up.
Yep.
I said, I'm getting my picture taken with the Baron. And
absolutely.
At 79 years old, the Baron could take me. In fact, here's a name you may or may not know. I don't know if you recall a ring announcer with the AWA by the name of Mick Karch. If you know Mick at all? Mick's got an old school wrestling fan page where a bunch of people post all their, not just AWA, but all the pictures. And I said, hey guys, my first time ever sharing a picture, I go, I want to share this with you. I saw the Baron. Look how great he looks at 79 years old. And some guy who I don't even know comments on there, Baron looks great. Justin Clapper, not so much. And I'm like, yeah, a more accurate description could not have been.
People are cruel, aren't they? But hey, I know you enjoyed meeting Baron. He one of the nicest guys on the planet, right? I mean, for real.
I'd love to get, my dream is to get more AWA guys on here, but a lot of guys like Baron and Greg, I just don't have their contact information. But someday, if they see this, I would love to get them on, because I think just having a talk with the Baron, I just. History to me is history of everything, but the history of pro wrestling in some of these territories, I think is not in danger, but I want to keep it alive and keep people going. And especially right now with the pandemic, now's a good time to go back if you're stuck in the house, or if you were, kind of go back if you're a wrestling fan and look up some of these things.
Well, look, I'm a history lover. I mean, I love all history. I love traveling to Europe and seeing the 1,000-year-old castles. I traveled to Israel and to Jordan with the $1 Million Man Ted DiBiase. We went on a pilgrimage and we toured 3,000-year-old Roman ruins, you know. And in regards to wrestling, I think it's important. I mean, if it wasn't for the history of wrestling, wrestling wouldn't be what it is today. Let's just be real. And so I think we have to respect a lot of these names you're mentioning that some people may not even have a clue. They're going to have to go Google or look up and go, who? Dick the who? You know, and that's okay. Go do your homework, go research, and search your history. But if it wasn't for a lot of these guys, I feel very fortunate to have had the career I had and to have been in the ring with guys who paved the way for me to have the career I had. I mean, Dory Funk Jr. Dory Funk Jr. was gracious to take me and school me in the ring, in the art of wrestling in the ring here in the Mid-Atlantic area. And I feel grateful that Dory was a name that some people probably would never know or, might have recognized from a magazine back in those days, maybe. Johnny Weaver. Johnny Weaver was legendary in the Mid-Atlantic, had a stellar career with alongside Johnny Valentine, Greg Valentine's dad, and so many amazing names in the history of pro wrestling. In fact, kind of up in your area, I would encourage people to head over to Dan Gable's museum in the Hall of Fame in Waterloo, Iowa. If you really want to see if you want to take a great trip down memory lane, go over to the Dan Gable Museum. It not only has pro wrestling over there, but amateur wrestling way, way, way back as well. And for the history buffs out there.
Yeah, absolutely. We've got a lot of pro wrestling history right here in the Midwest. I know Freddie Beal, the Beal throw. Another thing, off on a tangent, there's so many, if I watch these old school wrestling matches, and I wish more people that were younger than I am that were in the game still would watch, because I want to do an article on some moves that are lost that I think, everything old becomes new again, that I think somebody could really bring back some of these moves. Now, as much as I want to talk to you all day about everything, Magnum TA and everything, a couple things, because I want to be very respectful of your time.
Sure.
One of the things I wanted to talk about was you're selling out with Ricky and Robert when you and Ivan are wrestling with them. You guys are probably massive crowds and stuff. But what I want to talk about is when Magnum TA gets in his car accident, unfortunately, but you end up teaming with Dusty Rhodes as the Superpowers. What was that like? Because that was a meteoric change in fans booing you to you, being very popular. Was that a surprise, or how did you react to that fan reaction?
Yeah, I mean, a great question, and actually just back up just a second, and I'll get to that, because people have asked me even most recently, it's one of those what ifs, right? A lot of what ifs out there in our life for all of us, right? What if that had happened or that hadn't happened or whatever, and Magnum hadn't had the accident? Would Nikita Koloff ever have become a babyface? Would he ever become a good guy? And I don't know that I would have. Let me just say that, because the chemistry Terry and I had with each other, and that best of 7 series, which to date is still the most talked about series of matches when I go out and I'm out doing Legends autographs or Comic-Cons or different signings, is I hear the most about that. And we had such great chemistry, and of course, no secret, he was being groomed to step into Ric Flair's shoes and become world champion. And I could envision we would have went back and forth. In those days, storylines didn't last for 3.5 minutes. Storylines sometimes lasted for 3.5 years. I mean, you could get a real run out of a storyline, and we probably would have went back and forth for that world title, and I probably would have had that belt around my waist, once or twice, and most likely. All that said, he had the accident, right? And then Dusty and Jimmy Crockett come to me in Philadelphia when I got back from a tour in Japan and said, and I didn't even know he had the rack, and they had to convince me it was real. And then once they did, they said, we have an idea, and mystery partner, you know, Dusty Rhodes and in Charlotte. And what do you think? Take some time, give it some thought, let us know. You make the ultimate decision on it. And Justin, part of that decision of me saying yes had to do with all of Jim Crockett's, his experience in promoting wrestling, Dusty's experience in as a wrestler and as a booker. And I thought, well, if those two guys think it could work, then, you know, why not give it a shot? Now, I do know, I was talking to someone recently that they had a conversation with Dusty prior to his passing and specifically said, did you know when you guys did that night, it would get over the way it did? And he said, honestly, we did not. We knew it was a roll of the dice. We didn't know how the fans would respond to a Russian being a good guy. But to your point of the fans, from going from at one point the number one most hated guy in wrestling to becoming one of the fan favorites was I think a shock to all of us, and kind of a surreal moment as I can even think back right now, standing in that Charlotte Coliseum, listening to people through Dusty's cheering chant my name for 15 minutes is kind of a surreal moment.
Yeah, that's how I'm at it, because I'm like, that was a crazy. That's one of the crazier flips.
Yes, for sure. Yeah, 100%. Because I'm not a wrestling historian. I don't know that there were any Russian baby faces prior to that. Maybe there were, but I don't know.
Yeah, no, very good point. We'll get some of our fans on that. Real quick, I'm going to touch on this, because if this is true, then you've been asked this a million times. But like I said, I look a lot of stuff up on the internet, and I don't exactly trust it.
You mean it's not everything that's on the internet's not real, Justin?
No, I find out when I ask you. At least I ask you the questions off camera, so I don't look like a total idiot.
Come on, what's your question?
Did you try out for Rocky IV, the part of Drago?
True story. So the short version of that story is Terry Funk had reached out to because he had been in some movies with Sly, with Stallone, and he said, hey, we're going to have this Russian character, this Russian boxer in Rocky IV, and reached out to Terry Funk, said, hey, are there any wrestlers that might fit the model? And Terry said, let me make a phone call. So he was friends. Him and Don Kernodle were friends. He calls Don, and because he had, there were all kinds of rumors floating around about, a real Russian right off the boat from Russia. And he goes, and Don goes, dude, this guy would be perfect, man. I'm telling you. So they sent me the script about a month in advance, and so I had a month to kind of memorize the lines and prepare myself. And then, and at first, Jim Crockett, again, credit to Dusty, because Crockett wasn't going to let me do it, because all the time they had invested in me to build my character into the mammoth heel that I was. He thought, man, if he lands the role, we lose him, And Dusty's, no, Jimmy, if he lands the role, I mean, Hulk Hogan, Thunder Lips, right? Rocky III.
That's huge.
He's like, Jimmy, he lands the role, our business goes through the roof most likely, right? And so, yeah, we lose him for a short time. But anyway, all that said, so they fly me out there, and it's me. I remember the day I pulled out, and they were first class the whole way. They were so nice, and I remember stepping out of the limousine, and Stallone rolls up in his red Corvette with Bridget Nielsen behind the wheel, and we go into introduce myself. We go into the studio, and it's myself, Dolph Lundgren, and Kerry Von Erich. It's like, okay, guys, it's between the three of you. Now, I knew immediately my odds increased from 33% to 50% when Kerry Von Erich said to me, he goes, hey, are there some lines or something like we're supposed to be like? I'm like, Kerry, are you kidding me? Like we've had him for a month. Like, I'm like, all right, the odds just went up.
Yep.
It's between me and Dolph Lundgren at this point, I believe. And so yeah, I drew the short straw. I had to read first. I read 2 by myself, like I was, speaking to a Russian consulate, and then Stallone goes, "Hey, let's do a third one, and side by side, and halfway through, turn nose to nose, finish your lines." And I go, "Okay." So we do it, and Justin, I knew my opportunity was, what I say, kind of went out the door when I heard this conversation. The yell cut. Stallone asked the director, "How was it?" And the director says this. He goes, "Well, it was really good." This is like quote unquote. He goes, "It's really good until you turned towards each other." And then he's talking to Stallone. He goes, "And then we lost you in his shadow." And I thought, whoa, not good for his ego, not good for my opportunity. I mean, because the reality is I'm 285, jacked up. Stallone's 5'6", 160 pounds, ripped, but he's only $160. And so I dwarfed him on the silver screen, and for that reason, they called me a couple weeks later and said, "You're just too big. You're just too. It's just too unbelievable." So, but I feel very fortunate to have even had a shot at it. And of course, everyone knows Dolph Lundgren got the role, and the rest is history.
Right? Yeah, you can't go wrong with a story like that in your back
No,
pocket.
it was great. And Stallone
Yeah.
was great. I mean, he really was. He was awesome, and it was just an honor to meet him and spend some time with him. So,
And he's been even before the Thunder Lips with Paradise Alley, a longtime supporter of professional wrestling and the
yeah,
wrestling.
his mom. His mom was a promoter of Glow, right?
Right. Yep, I forget about that. I didn't know if that was my timeline, but yeah.
Yep.
That's fantastic. So, couple more questions.
Okay.
The last one I kind of want to about wrestling is because I'm an AWA mark and a half. I will say that I get really excited just out of high school or just still in my senior year. You show up in the AWA and challenge Larry Zbyszko. Little do I know it's the waning days of that promotion, but I got to tell you, when Tully Blanchard shows up and you show up now, I mean, this is, 89, 90, 91.
Yeah.
I still only have 3 channels. So, I mean, I'm excited because now you, Tully, and some of these other Wahoo earlier, but some of these guys who I have read in the magazines now are coming to life on my television. And how long were you actually with the AWA on that second time, and then 89, 90, whatever that was?
Well, part of the reason I did that, with Jim Crockett's blessing, because when we started going into the Northeast, into the Meadowlands, and into Philadelphia and Baltimore and some of these other markets that Vince McMahon had locked up for many, many years, we started doing co-promotions with the AWA. I forget what they were calling it.
Pro Wrestling USA.
Pro Wrestling USA. Thank you. And it was a combination of AWA, NWA, and so Vern. The writing was kind of on the wall, and so I thought, if I can go up and help those guys, and I was mainly doing television tapings for them, just to try to help with their ratings, try to help the territory survive. And then some house shows against Larry for the belt, and that's the main reason that I went up there. And so I wasn't on really AWA's payroll per se. I was just doing special appearances for them as a favor, really to try to help them stay afloat. So that's the actual story.
Okay, and then who knew in 2020 that we could look back on history of the AWA and realize how far ahead Vern was with the Team Challenge series with no fans. He was just, I shouldn't make light of the pandemic, but it just, you go back and go, wow, I could twist history and go, hey, the guy's way ahead of the game, no fans in the arena in 89, I believe, or whenever that Team Challenge series.
Yeah, I mean, Vern was, of course, waning. Anyone who knows the story in the latter days, towards the latter days of his life, and just unwilling to adapt to the changes. If he had been, he would have retained some of the talent he had, and it's unfortunate. But that said, I mean, early in the early days, he had a territory. Everybody was, I mean, at one point, my understanding, there was like a 2-year wait list just to get into his territory. A 2-year wait list. Everybody wanted to wrestle in the AWA. And so, kudos to him for all those years of success that he had. It's just unfortunate that at the tail end of it, he was just so set in his ways that he just, didn't seem willing to bend or to give in to some of the changes.
Right. And I remember I was in college at River Falls. Now, this has to be 93 or 94 at the Treasure Island Casino. I watched an AWA show. It was Wahoo versus Larry. So they were even off TV. And I'm in college. I'm playing football, lifting weights, doing things, looking at girls, not paying attention to pro wrestling too much anymore. So I probably wasn't even aware that they weren't on TV anymore. But got to see a show.
Hey,
Vern was actually there at the Treasure Island Casino show.
That's pretty cool. Hey, Justin, I want to tell you how small a world it really, right? It's a big world, but when you distill it down, it's really kind of a small world, right? I want to tell you how small it is. I spent several days on the River Falls campus, okay? One summer, spent several days on the River Falls campus. This was back early in my high school career. Remember I told you I was a kicker and a punter?
Right.
There were 2 guys named Chris Barr and Matt Barr. Those names ring a bell at all?
Yeah, Matt Barr is definitely one of the best kickers in history.
Matt Barr and Chris Barr, twin brothers, who ran a kicking camp in River Falls, University of Wisconsin, River Falls. And so I spent several days there going through their camp there in River Falls. And I have just great memories of that. They were both in the NFL at the time and running these camps. And so just very familiar with your campus, my friend.
That's cool. Yeah, I love that. You don't realize it at the time, but you had the best of both worlds because it was a small town feel. And I just crossed the bridge by Hudson and you're in the Twin Cities. So it was.
Well, and that's what I enjoyed really about Morehead State University. People might not be familiar with Morehead. And by the way, I mentioned Mark Reed backing up Phil Sims. Little nugget that someone go, who cares? But Phil Sims was from Morehead, Kentucky College. Mark Reed was from Morehead, Minnesota College, and they're both on the same football team for 4 years. Kind of a little nugget that one of those little known facts that some people could care less about, but there you go.
Now, I don't know the timeline of New York Giants football, but is he on the team long enough to see a Super Bowl or no?
So he was there. Let's see. I don't think so because I don't know if the Giants. And again, I'm not a historian of Super Bowls, but I don't know if Sims and the Giants ever played in a Super Bowl. Did they? It would because it was. It would have been like 80, 81, 82, 83, 84, so, somewhere in there. Early 80s.
Yeah, it might have been later 80s. I know definitely in 1990, the Super Bowl, Phil was injured in that Jeff Hostetler because I was a football freak at that time. Gotcha. What I want to close with is probably the most important question that I have for you. It's about what Nikita Koloff is up to now. We can see the Koloff for Christian Ministries behind you, but I want to give you a chance to talk about. I know you said you go to conventions and everything, but let's talk about what Nikita Koloff is all about.
I appreciate it, Justin, and I do love going to the conventions and autograph signings and occasional live events and because I love the wrestling fans because and I'll be on record over and over and over again as saying I believe they're as much as I'm loyal to the Vikings and Twins and some folks are loyal to their sporting teams, I still say the wrestling fan is the most loyal fan on the planet, which is why I still enjoy getting out there and now hearing your stories. In fact, I'm revising my last book, Nikita, A Tale of the Ring of Redemption. I'm actually revising that. I've had, in fact, this week, we've been spending hours editing new chapters for that book and adding some new pictures to it. And one of the chapters that I'm going to include is a chapter called Your Stories. And I just got the idea to get stories from the fans. And I did something a couple months ago during this lockdown on a video. I said, hey, if you have a story, you know, if I somehow impacted your life, you know, whether it's a wrestling match or just a fun story, or maybe I spoke at your church, or somehow, some way I've had some sort of impact, you know, email me that story. And so I'm going to include some of those in the revision of my book. So it is my story. Nikita, A Tale of the Ring of Redemption is my story. It's about my life, but I'm actually going to include some of your stories, some of the fan stories, a chapter in that book. So I'm working on that. I've been working on that a lot, especially during this lockdown, working on a brand new book as well. And then I have 2 other books, Breaking the Chains and Wrestling with Success, that I wrote prior. So I'll have 4 books out there. But I travel the world now. It's really, again, I told you early on, Justin, it's been kind of a wild ride. Never in a million years did I dream I'd become a pro wrestler and have the career I had. But also never in a million years did I ever dream I'd have now traveled to 30 different countries, all 50 states, and become an evangelist and minister the gospel. And that all, the defining moment for that happened in 17 October 1993, 11 months after I left wrestling, and I'd met a Christian couple in other businesses I was involved in, invited me to their church. And I didn't grow up in church, just like I didn't grow up in Russia. In case you hadn't figured that out yet, I didn't grow up in Russia. But I didn't grow up in church, but yet, you know, I met these folks at service one day and found myself at an altar, surrendering my life to Christ. And that opened up a door that set me on a path where wrestling actually became a training ground. And what I mean by that, Justin, is when I look back at my wrestling career, I flew on airplanes, I rented cars, I stayed in hotels, I talked on microphones in front of cameras, entertaining crowds. And when I look back at the last 25 years of my life, what I've been doing in ministry is I've been flying on airplanes, renting cars, staying in hotels, talking on microphones in front of, not to entertain crowds, although I can do that, but to deliver the gospel message. And so I've been doing that all these years. I'm partnered with a guy by the name of Lex Luger. Some might know that name, the Total Package. In fact, just last week, some might see the shirt Man Camp. It's a ministry that he and I co-facilitate. It's a 5-day catalyst for men 18 years and older, come together for 5 days. And he and I combine all our years of knowledge in health and wellness, developing a championship mentality, and share our spiritual journeys. And our goal, Justin, is to equip these men to send them home being healthier in spirit, soul, and body, and to be better husbands, better fathers. Father's Day is coming up this weekend, right? Better fathers, better husbands, and just fulfill really the mandate on their life. And that's part of the goal. So a lot of men's ministry, a lot of preaching on Sunday mornings, and that's kind of the number one thing that I do. And I really appreciate you let me share a little bit of that.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And what a great your popularity with the wrestling fans in the 80s and just your whole career. I think that's kind of cool that allows you that platform, that helps you out. It's a great.
Yeah, it does. And I can tell you what's funny is many of the pastors that bring me in, like a lot of them didn't even know I was, in ministry or an evangelist. And they're like, but Justin, they all grew up watching wrestling. And they're like, dude, I know you'll bring people will come to hear your story. They won't darken the doors of a church to hear me preach, but they will come to hear your story. And so many, many, many pastors have said that, over the years. So I like I said, travel all over the country, literally all over the world. I was slated for 7 different countries in 2020. course, all of that got wiped away because of this crazy virus thing. But that's not. I mean, I was supposed to go back to the Olympics back to Japan and minister during the Olympics this year, which would have been my first trip back to Japan since 1986 when I was in the squared circle. And so it's just an honor and a privilege, and certainly the wrestling as a platform has certainly opened up many, many, many doors for speaking engagements and everything else that I do.
Yeah, and looking at, you know, the work that you do and others do, that having that platform where somebody, I'm not going to say might be on the fence, but a lot of people are afraid to speak about religion because of the world that we live in, and am I going to offend somebody? But to have, I can imagine a pro wrestler as yourself show up at my church and going, wow, this is really going to help change my mind. And for the young men looking up to you and Lex Luger, I mean, I think it's fantastic, and I'm happy to share that.
Well, I appreciate it, and I understand that, and I get that in today's climate and in today's world. But this is something I'm very passionate about, and I don't know, I can't speak for anyone else's story. I only know my story, right? And as I share my story and how my life has changed and how my life is transformed, I mean, look, if anyone reads Lex Luger's book, Wrestling with the Devil, I'm going to tell you right now, if you knew Lex before, right? If Justin, if you had met Lex back in those days, by his own admission, when he did that character, the narcissist, up in WWE, that wasn't a far stretch from the truth. I mean, that was like, not many people liked Lex. I joke and I say I was one of the few who actually liked Lex Luger back in those days. But if you meet him now, like if you come to this man camp and you spend a few days with Lex, you would have, and you knew him then, you would not be able to say, okay, he is not the same guy. Something definitely happened in his life because he's not the same guy. And that's just part of the story we tell. And you know what? You know, the Bible says not to be ashamed of your story, not to be ashamed of the gospel. And so, you know, I'm just going to love people, and they can, whether they accept my story or they don't, that's okay. I'm going to love people anyway. It doesn't matter. I'm still just going to love on people. So.
We're a travel company. I know I said, I always end these interviews like this. I know I said last question 6 hours ago. And you've been to many amazing places. The one question I have is, did you ever wrestle in Russia? And if you did you use the Nikita? I don't know if anybody, and I don't know if that happened back then.
No, I think it was still kind of the curtain, I don't think really had fallen yet. But I do have one story you might appreciate. We did a 10-day tour in Kuwait. This is the days I was one of the most feared, hated heels in wrestling. And in Kuwait, we did a 10-day tour, and word got back to us that the Russian ambassador to Kuwait saw all of the advertising with the Russian Nightmare and the CCCP headband and the hammer sickle on his side. He's like, who is this guy? And he's like, if he's we want him staying at the embassy while he's here. And if he's not, why is he being a Russian imposter, kind of deal.
Oh, my goodness.
Yeah, it's like true story. So the promoter had to smarten him up. No. It's just, it's just a character. And he actually made the promoter go around and like black out all the headbands on all the advertising and everything. He was offended that I was pretending to be a Russian. But that said, when I got to Kuwait, I found out the first night he and his wife came to the opening matches the first night. Word got to us in the dressing room. I go out the door, Justin, and people are cheering me like crazy. I'd never been a babyface. I didn't even know what to do. I didn't know how to respond. Fortunately, I was wrestling a guy by the name of Sergeant Slaughter. He comes out, and all the people are booing him. And I'm in the ring. I'm like, Sarge, dude, I don't know how to be a babyface, bro. He's like, kid, just follow my lead. And I'm like, all right, you got it. And he was gracious enough to put me over. My hand got raised. The Russian ambassador was happy, and I did not have to stay at the Russian embassy.
That's that's the good news. Before we go, I want to please tell us again how we can keep track of Nikita Koloff, where we can buy a book. I don't know if you've got Nikita Koloff T-shirts or anything for sale, but just keep us all in the loop of how we can keep track of you.
Appreciate that. Social media, a lot of people follow me on Instagram and Twitter. Nikita Koloff with the number 1 behind it. That's the real me on Instagram and Twitter. On Facebook, you'll find the real me on Facebook. Look for me standing in a river with a couple other guys. Want to take a guess, Justin, at what river I might have been standing in and take a shot in the dark?
That's not the River Jordan?
The River Jordan. Ted DiBiase and I, the $1 Million Man, and Jason Sanderson did a 3-day trip did a trip to Israel and Jordan, I mentioned earlier. And we took turns baptizing each other in the Jordan River. It was pretty amazing, emotional experience there, and following the footsteps of Jesus. But that's the real me on Facebook, Koloff.org. If guys want to find more information,
show up here, but there's the.
There you go. Yep, that's it. Jordan River, and then if guys want to find out more information about Man Camp and come and hang out with Lex and I for a few days, mancamp.info, Koloff.org, O-R-G, mancamp.info. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you. It's been our pleasure. So thank you very much, Nikita. And we look forward to talking to you soon.
All right. Bless all you fans out there. Look forward to meeting you.